It's 5 o'clock, so it must be the Jimmy Boy Hour. I'm your host, Omarcomin, and welcome back to another 9th Age Fantasy Battles 2020 Version 2 Battle Report. I'm your host, as always, Omarcomin. And we got another battle report here, this time with a local opponent for once, which is kind of interesting. This is MorganTreeMan, also known as Lionel, who also happens to live in the same city as me. So we managed to connect on Facebook, set up a game, and had the rare opportunity to play someone who actually happens to be in my time zone. So that was a little bit of a treat. The game itself was pretty interesting. He was playing his Undead Dynasties. He's normally an Ogre Khans player, so I think he's trying out a new army, and some of the tournament players in the forum may point out some weaknesses in his list. I think they're fairly apparent to they were apparent to me. I think they'll be apparent to you as well, but he's learning how to play the army and figure it out, and no harm there. So we had a lot of fun, rolled a lot of dice, made some pretty interesting mistakes, and one that at around midnight was a little bit devastating to our will to go on. So I'll try to remember to tell you that story when we get there. But the game itself was played on map 7, which you see here, and the objective was hold the center. We had the was a dawn attack. The one with the flanks was the deployment, so Lionel chose the bottom with the attacking position, and I'm on top, as you see here, with the big flanks. I started to deploy and I just dropped everything, given that this is a objective that favors me strongly and demands that he meet me in the center with the battle line style that I play. I think it behooves me to start first and to basically move on to that objective as quickly as I possibly can. So this is deployment here. Missing from this image, unfortunately blocked by the tools window there, is his unit of 8 Shabti, which is probably the most frightening unit on his side of the table. He does have some Sandstalkers and some Skeletons with underground ambush, but I've chosen to essentially ignore those and play primarily for the objective and play for his basically his big block of Necropolis Guard. My game here is, as you'll see unfold, is essentially to take the center and either force him to come to me in unfavorable charges or ultimately trap that very large points-rich unit of Necropolis Guard. His characters are also in that unit or hiding behind it. His Nomarch or his Architect, whatever you want to call it, are back there. Complicating things for me are his flyers, so I have to keep in mind those Reapers. He was probably more concerned than he needed to be about my miners. Those Reapers are pretty deadly, so he was trying to use them to protect himself from the ambush, so that's why they're deployed in that corner. So this is deployment. Dwarfs take first turn. I will note a couple funny things I did in deployment that I probably wouldn't do again. I think I misplaced my anvil. It was fine there ultimately, but sort of in the way, and probably could have been more central to reach more of my units and provide sort of that buff coverage. And the second unit of Rangers ultimately was misplaced, and that becomes apparent as soon as he starts to advance and they can no longer shoot. So we'll get to that though. So this is deployment. End of Dwarf's turn 2, turn 1. Let's not jump ahead. Looks a little bit like this. So shuffled up to contest the objective. With hold the center, you don't begin to accumulate objective tokens until after turn 2. So still don't want to give him the benefit of choosing his charges, but so I didn't move up quite enough to give him really healthy charges, except for, with his very weak scouting skeleton horseman. The chariot on the left hand side, I did want to basically bait into a charge. With the Kingsguard behind, there's not a whole lot they could really do, and the Shabti would be too far out for any kind of counter charge. So there's no combo charge here in play. He basically has to pick which of the two warrior units he wants to charge, and then ultimately get smashed to bits by 15 weight in Kingsguard. So magic, I managed to get, looks like 3 buffs off, probably because he didn't particularly care if I had them. They're kind of nothing buffs anyway, because those chariots should make pretty short work of a 10-man unit of warriors with impact hits and everything else. But not a super eventful turn. Basically just taking a little bit of the field and doing some shooting. It looks like one of my cannons misfired, the other missed, obviously, and I think I did 2 wounds with my rangers on a chariot. So that's missing from this photograph, but I'm pretty sure those 22 shots into the chariots did at least 2 wounds. So this is the end of Undead Dynasty's turn 1. He ultimately chose to charge the second unit of warriors with his chariots, and looks like he got in. What spell is that? Ancestral Aid. So they're re-rolling failed to hit rolls there, those chariots. So they got into the warriors and looks like broke them and forced them to flee through the Kingsguard unit, and he chose to pursue directly into the Kingsguard. I don't think too much else happened. Actually, one other thing happened here. He used Whisper of the Veil, which would reduce my unit's resilience by 1. And I believe he cast it on that same warrior unit, which probably would have served him better to put it on the Kingsguard unit. But chose to put it on that warrior unit, and I let it through but devoured it, so he couldn't use it for the rest of the game. Basically thinking that of his spells was probably going to be the most damaging to my game. His spells were Spectral Blades, Whisper of the Veil, Hasten the Hour, and Ancestral Aid, with the Evocation of Souls attributes. So of those 3, I mean, they're all, with the exception of Haste in the Hour, of those 3 unit buffs, I felt reducing resilience and discipline was probably going to be the most damaging. So I opted to play around the other 2 and eliminate that one as early as I could. That's pretty much it. It doesn't look like he shot anything down on my end, so we proceed to Dwarf's turn 2. So this is the end of Dwarf's turn 2. Looks like this. So you see my miners arrived, my Kingsguard obviously countercharged that unit of chariots, and I don't think, to anyone's surprise, destroyed them. It looks like I didn't take a single wound though, likely owing to the fact that I got resilience in on that unit of 15 Kingsguard, so his impact hits even didn't manage to penetrate. My miners arrive and chip off 2 skeletal horsemen, which is pretty good work, and I believe I hit with my left cannon on the Reapers, doing, looks like 3 wounds there. Looks like the Rangers did 1 wound to the Shabti, who are now in charge range. So that's, in fact, yeah. So this is one move I made, was to shuffle my warriors forward, but position them in such a way that if he were to charge me with his Shabti, he would be touching the edge of the hill, and so both units of Kingsguard, whether he chose to overrun or not, would be able to still see them. So. And I think I left him like a 6 or a 7-inch overrun in between the warriors and the Kingsguard. So the idea being, if he did charge, both units of Kingsguard could potentially counter the Shabti, or at least have a charge opportunity against them. What else happened here? Move up to take the objective, of course, with that first unit of warriors, offering him I think that's a flank charge. The intention there would have been if he charged into that flank, I would have fled, and he would have sort of been in no man's land with looks like 2 units of Kingsguard and my unit of Spears pressing down on him, which I don't think he would have won. That unit of Necroguard, by the way, does have the grudge from my general, so I have hatred against them. Apart from that, took a little bit more territory again, not too much. I think next turn is when I really start to tighten the screws and press in on him and threaten his line. So it's a little bit different screenshot here, but this is the end of Undead Dynasty's turn 2. Both of his units of ambushers arrived, and they're now in my backline threatening. So he didn't charge anything except for my cannon. So his scouting skeletons made it into the cannon. I'm not sure why there's only 2 there. Oh, this is after combat, that's why. So yeah, so right, okay. So he charged with the skeletons into the cannon. His 2 ambushers arrived in my backfield. He moved forward a little bit with his Necropolis Guard and repositioned his Tomb Reapers so that they would have potentially a flank charge on anything that moved too much further forward. I did use his positioning here against him and moved up just outside of his charge arc with all but my... So I moved my warrior units. Sorry, we'll get to that. I'm jumping ahead. Looks like in Magic Phase he got through Ancestral Aid on the Shabti, but I have no interest in fighting them anyway. And he also casted Hasten the Hour on my Thane. So my Thane took a pretty devastating wound off that. It's down to 2 wounds. And the Sandstalkers, which have probably one of the more outrageous I guess variances or spike damage potential in the game, arrived and just shot the absolute shit out of my Rangers. I think, what would that have been? 1, 2... It was 8 wounds they did? Yowza. So they did 8 wounds on the Rangers, but didn't panic them. And I will basically spend the rest of... those 2 units of Rangers will basically spend the rest of their game chasing after those guys, which really makes the case for having musicians on them, I think. I might eliminate the Vanguard from one of my units of warriors if I can. I think I need it for the core points though. But gotta find some way to get them musicians so that they can react a little bit better to threats like those. Combat was pretty funny. The Flaccid Skeletal Horseman did 0 wounds to the cannon, and it looks like the cannon did 1 back to them. So I think Lionel was pretty disappointed in that, but it didn't really surprise me all that much. Those boner boys are not too tough. Let's proceed to end of Dwarves turn 3. Which looks a bit like this. I did not declare any charges. Magic Phase. It looks like I got some magic in on that unit of warriors that moved up to chaff the Shabti. So I'm forcing the Shabti here into a flank charge they don't really want to take, which would expose their flank to the Kingsguard, and even if they overrun, I should be able to catch them either in the back or in the flank. So he's got a very difficult choice ahead of him there. I do the same thing on the western front with the Necroguard, exposing the flank of those warriors to that Reaper as well as to his bowmen. But that I think is a noble sacrifice from those 10 dwarves. If I can pull any of those units into the center where I can get a charge off on them, that's exceedingly worthwhile from my perspective. Combat, it looks like the Skeletal Horseman and the Cannon traded 1 for 1, so no big deal there. That's a push. And the Rangers reposition to try to do something to these Sandstalkers, who are able to just shoot the heck out of them. The miners moved up and shot off one of these Tomb Reapers, so that's definitely a bonus to eliminate 4 of those strength 5 attacks. That's a big deal, I think. Weakening that unit by 50% will help a lot in dealing with it later on. And we proceed to Undead Dynasties. Yeah, so this is after Undead Dynasty's turn 3, but you can see some of the charges that I declared in the subsequent turn. That's okay. We'll talk about his turn first. So he did charge the unit of warriors with his skeletal bowmen into the flank, but I think they lost by 1 or 2 and managed to pass both their break test as well as their reform test. So I managed to reform, giving the Kingsguard a nice juicy flank charge on them and the potential of overrunning into the flank of the Necro Guard. So my plan here is to basically charge the warriors out of the way and the Kingsguard into the flank of those skeletal bowmen. However, we'll complete Undead Dynasty's turn 3 first. So the combat up in the top right with the cannon, it looks like the cannon finally did the deed and killed the remaining skeletal horsemen. However, the Winged Reaper has repositioned to threaten a charge on that cannon in its next turn. Magic, it looks like he only got off Spectral Blades on his Necro Guard unit. Which again, I'm not in a huge hurry to charge just yet. And his shooting has nothing really to speak of. It looks like he took 2 wounds off that unit of Rangers. However, and Lionel will admit this, when he repositioned these Sandstalkers, he was doing so within his 7-inch movement range, and was limited by that 7 inches to basically giving me a charge. So what he should have done is probably maneuver them in such a way that would be impossible, even marching if needed, and in the case that he passed his march test. But giving those Rangers a charge was pretty devastating to those snakes. They're not great in combat, obviously. The other cannon, it looks like, survived with 1 wound, and Stubborn 9 is a pretty powerful tool on them, so they keep those skeletons busy for another turn. And then the Shabti, so this was an interesting move on his part. When I moved up to chaff those Shabti and forced them into a flank charge, he just shuffled sideways, so now they're head-on for their charge. So I think what I'm showing here with this photo is actually the charges I declared in this turn. So this is the top of turn 4 dwarfs. And so we have a 11-inch charge on those skeletal riders and a very short charge, maybe about the same, probably a 9 onto these skeletal bowmen. And unfortunately, I think what happens is the 1 unit of Kingsguard fails. The other warriors do make it in. This is the picture of the end of Dwarf's turn 4. The warriors make it in, obviously, based on where they're standing now. And let's run down the rest of what happened. So in terms of movement, on the eastern flank, the Rangers move up to support charge those Sandstalkers in the flank. Behind the hill here with the Kingsguard and the warriors, the nightmare there would be the Tomb Reapers charging a unit and then receiving a overrun charge from a unit like the Shabti. That would pretty much guarantee either the complete destruction of a Kingsguard unit or very, very close and guaranteed a lost combat. So I basically aligned so that I was directly behind the warrior unit in front and limited the distance between the Kingsguard unit and the warrior unit so that the Winged Reapers could not land there, forcing him basically to giving only one charge option against that Kingsguard unit in the center. I suppose he probably could have charged the spears, though that's really far even for Winged Reapers to make. So that was the game plan there. If he, of course, chose not to charge, as he'd done for most of the game, we'd still be in a good position and would continue to keep those Shabti out of the fight. That's pretty much the fightiest unit in his army, so if we can keep that busy and away from the center, we're in a really good position to take the game. Combat, it looks like the warriors against the bowmen did very, very little. Even with gleaming in from the magic phase, nothing seems to have happened. My cannon appears to have missed on a short range shot on that Winged Reaper, which is a bit of a bummer. And from there, that's pretty much it. So the only other movement that's really noteworthy is that of the warriors in the center, who again are chaffing that Necropolis Guard unit, forcing them into what I believe to have been an impossible charge. I don't think they could have completed their wheel without clipping the Kingsguard. Although I think the way it works is they close the door as far as they can, and then the warrior unit the wheel as far as they can, and the warrior unit has to close the door. But that still would have created an overrun situation into the Kingsguard unit, which I would have been fine with had he elected to do that. The warriors on the eastern flank, obviously 10 paired weapon warriors, is a pretty substantial adversary for 5 skeletal horsemen that could barely do a wound on a cannon, so they win that combat and wheel to or reform to face the flank of the Necropolis Guard and his wizard bunker in the back. So here we are under Dynasty's turn 4, end of, and you see charges declared. The Reaper charged the cannon and clearly made short work of that. The other unit of Reapers charged the central unit of Kingsguard and got a very big boost in the magic phase. So they're rerolling both rerolling to wound hits, and they're rerolling I believe hit rolls with Ancestral Aid. So he's got both of those in on his Winged Reapers. Manages to kill 6, it looks like, and they did 4 wounds in return, killing 1 Winged Reaper outright. So not enough to break them, especially in proximity of the BSB, and with Steadfast they're solid on a 9. He did charge my anvil, which skeletons with spears even had a very, very hard time dealing with doing any wounds. And it looks like took some wounds in return. The anvil is unbreakable for anyone who doesn't know, so if you don't have something fairly substantial charging it, it is a pretty tough nut to crack. It looks like the Rangers killed off one of those snakes, which is pretty good on them. They do have shields, so hitting them on 4s is pretty tough, and that's a grind that should go on for quite a while, at least until the other Ranger unit arrives to assist. The warriors in the center, again with Gleaming, fail to eliminate that unit of skeletal bowmen, which is kind of a bummer, but not really relevant since they weren't needed at this point to deal with that Necropolis Guard unit. So we proceed to Dorf's turn 5, and this is essentially where things get real bad for my buddy Lionel. So this is actually this is where things get really dumb for me. So what happened was I charged the flank of that Winged Reaper, with my spear unit having taken 2 wounds on my Thane, actually 1 wound on my Thane, who was at 2 wounds remaining, and even on a flank charge, I wasn't able to get my Thane out of the combat, so very, very stupid move, and the Reaper allocated all 4 of its attacks into the Thane, killing him pretty unceremoniously. So that was a bit sad. However, the rest of the combats and maneuvers went pretty heavily in my favor. You see the center unit of warriors, the center unit of Kingsguard, and the flanking unit of warriors, which I think made that charge on a 10, all made it into combat with the Necropolis Guard. So he has that mask item for them, which gives them weapon skill 6 and defensive skill 6. So it was a bit of a tough combat, even with Hatred. However, that many attacks out of Dwarven Holds, even at the same initiative step, was pretty good. So I think I had, I don't know, 16 attacks. Maybe, what would I have had? I don't know, 22 attacks or something from the Warriors, and another 15 from the Kingsguard by the time I got to hit. And I ended up doing something absurd like 17 wounds to those Necropolis Guard, who have virtually no armor. Hatred in this combat as well. And I had Gleaming on my Kingsguard, so the primary unit they were able to attack weren't really able to do all that much against, even hitting on... They would have hit on 3s normally, but with Gleaming they hit on 4s. So he crumbled a lot. I think he crumbled 7, and at that point, basically, the game was pretty much over for him. So we called it at this point. Now, in this turn, and I feel really badly about this, I was down to my last 4 Flux cards, and I rolled a d4 to select my Flux card, and then proceeded to roll d4s for pretty much the next, I don't know, for the entirety of this turn, in fact. So for combat and for shooting, all I was rolling was d4s, and I was wondering why I was rolling so poorly. And it wasn't until the following turn, when we went to calculate a stand and shoot from the miners, that we realized I was rolling d4s. So we went back and re-resolved the main combat from the previous turn against the Necropolis Guard, and it didn't resolve in my favor previously, but and I felt it should have. But I was rolling d4s, so the ultimate result was the game was just too far out of reach for him, with yet another unit of Kingsguard pressing down on his only remaining scoring unit, and, well, I guess Shabti score as well, but they're still caught in a little bit of a dilemma, and the backfield kind of, at a standstill. So at this point we chose to call the game. I was already up, I believe 1 or 2 to nothing on the objective, and so we ended it there. So a little word of advice to anyone playing on Universal Battle: after you roll your magic phase, just make sure, especially if you use bound magic, just make sure that you're back to rolling d6s before you go ahead and roll 3 different combats using d4s and tear your hair out at the fact you can't roll a 6. So that's that. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any advice on how I can improve the reporting, I know I bounced around a lot here today, but I'm enjoying making these, and I'll continue, because I learn a lot from going through this process, as well as from the advice that I can gain from fellow players who've learned hard lessons in the same way. So with that said, that's pretty much it. I'm going to sign off. So stay Jimmy, boys.